So good afternoon, friends and colleagues, and welcome to the fourth webinar of the USAID and Reliance Foundation Women Connect India Speaker Series. Today's webinar is entitled Enabled by Technology, Access to Government Schemes. And it's about learning technology solutions, which are helping Indian women and citizens at large to access government programs and schemes designed for them. To discuss this, we have with us today Madhuri Dhariwal and Tarun Cherukuri from Indus Action, and Madhura Karnik and Aniket Deogar from darshak. Welcome, speakers, and thank you for your time today. As audience, we have representatives from the awardee organizations of the Women Connect India Challenge 2021, along with colleagues from Reliance Foundation, USAID, and DAI. Thank you all for attending. I am Ritesh Datta, Gender and Technology Advisor at DAI and your host. Women Connect Challenge India, rolled out jointly by USAID and Reliance Foundation with DAI's assistance, is the national version of the Women Connect Challenge initiative rolled out by USAID in 2018 to support innovative projects which facilitate women's access to digital tools and solutions. The speaker series, which is part of the India Challenge 2021, is primarily targeted at our awardees, but will also be relevant for other social development organizations which are working towards eliminating gender digital divide in the country. They will be able to access the recording of these webinars on the Digital Frontiers YouTube page once they are uploaded post-production. So coming back to the webinar, India today is one of the most unequal economies in the world. As noted by the recently released World Inequality Report, the top 1% of India's population held about 22% of the total national income in 2021, while the bottom 50% of the population had just about 13%. There are numerous government schemes and policies in place to address the social and economic welfare of the citizens, but obviously implementation is the key. The government's flagship scheme, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, for example, launched in 2015 to generate awareness and improve the efficiency of welfare services intended for girls in India, was recently in the news for the wrong reasons, both underutilization and incorrect utilization. This is where organizations such as Indus Action and darshak come in, supporting governments to implement on the supply side and assisting citizens across such government schemes and policies as part of the demand generation. Both these organizations have used innovative technology solutions to support and scale their models and have incorporated robust strategies to engage and include women in their programs. Today's webinar is about learning from their experiences. We will hear from our esteemed speakers, after which we will have an open Q&A round. So remember to jot down your questions while you hear our speakers so that you can ask them at the end. Our first speakers today are Madhuri Dhariwal and Tarun Cherukuri from Indus Action. Madhuri is the senior lead for strategy and learning at Indus Action and is passionate about working with children in the public education sector and creating evidence-based policy. She is an alumna of the Harvard Graduate School of Education with an MA in International Education Policy. And Tarun is the co-founder and CEO of Indus Action. Tarun has also been a part of Teach for India's mission since its inception. He is a chemical engineer by training and holds a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School. Tarun has also been an Obama Foundation Fellow, a DRK Foundation entrepreneur, and is currently a GLG Social Impact Fellow. Over to both of you, Madhuri and Tarun.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So the way we'll structure this is we'll use the first 10-15 minutes to take you through a presentation where we have a case study of how we approach our work, and subsequently followed by Aniket and Madhura from darshak sharing their presentations, well, and then we have time for the second half of the hour to take question answers. I'll hand over to Madhuri to get started with our slide presentation.
Great. So going to start off by, instead of us telling you what we do at Indus Action, we think it's a good idea to just show a video about the work that we intend to do in the larger space. And This is a video that the World Bank has created, and it is about investing in people to improve India's human capital. And it's very closely linked to the work that Intersection hopes to do and is currently engaged in. So I'm just going to play this.
All parents have big dreams for their children. That they'll grow up to be healthy, successful, and happy people. But how can these dreams come true? Well, that depends on two things. What investments are we making to help families achieve their dreams? And how urgently are we making them? Because life is full of surprises. Some surprises can fill families with pride and happiness. But others are more difficult to cope with. So what investments should India focus on for the next generation to experience a better life? In India today, by the time children grow up and start working, they are likely to be just half as productive as they could have been with full education and good health. This means they won't learn enough, they won't earn enough. This is a story that needs to change immediately. Building human capital and enhancing the physical and mental potential of children is the most important long-term investment any country can make for a brighter future. India has already taken important steps in this direction. But to bridge the gap between today's reality and tomorrow's dreams, these efforts need to be accelerated. And this process starts even before a child is born. Families must have access to clean water and sanitation, appropriate nutrition, and healthcare services, so that mothers and children survive childbirth and children get physically and mentally ready to start school. Next, boys and girls must not only complete their schooling, but they must also be healthy and learn enough to reach their full potential. When unexpected challenges come their way, families must have access to social protection to build their resilience. When pandemics disrupt life, children will be better prepared and adapt to new ways of learning. And when climate change impacts them, they will help find solutions and march on. In time, these healthier, smarter children will raise healthier, smarter children of their own. They will be equipped to care for their elders. And this beautiful story will continue for generations. But for this happy ending, India needs to act now. To build this human capital, India has invested in flagship programs in health and nutrition, water and sanitation, education, skill development, and social protection. To reach the next level, accelerated and collective efforts by the centre, states, and civil society are crucial to fulfill the potential of the country's greatest resource, its people. Invest in people, change the story.
I hope this video gave you all a glimpse of the larger picture that we're trying to talk about, which is of investing in India and ensuring that social protection reaches its most vulnerable. I'll tell you a little bit about how this connects to what Intersection does, and then we'll delve deeper a little bit on the issue at hand, which is gender and the digital divide. So Intersection was founded in 2013, and we started with the idea that we wanted to ensure access to legislated rights to the most vulnerable people. And we started with education and a policy that ensured access to schooling and private schooling for disadvantaged communities. While we got into education, we realized that starting at that age was not enough. And as something that we saw in the video, that we need to focus on a child's life from when they're conceived. So we started looking at 0 to 3,000 days of a child's life. And that brought into focus one of the most important caregivers for a young child, which is the mother. And we realized very quickly that if we want to be focusing on a child and their development, we need to include the parent and particularly the mother in that case as part of the picture to ensure that there is development and holistic development of that child. We started off with education, moved into a school readiness program, which then focused on children from 3 to 6 years of age. There, our learnings were that a hungry child will not focus on, whether it's a blue triangle or a red square, and they really might not care as much about it. Also, learning levels are very different depending on what your first 3 years of your life have been and what your growth rate is like. So then we looked at the Right to Food Act, and under that, a maternity benefit program called the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, which is a direct benefit transfer scheme to women, to pregnant and lactating women, essentially. That brought into focus the whole nutritional aspect of ensuring that all government schemes related to mothers and children were connected to nutrition, were connected to that early phase of a child's life and of a mother's life while they have a child. PMMVY brought into focus for us, and the pandemic essentially exacerbated that entire problem of livelihoods, particularly looking at women and their livelihood situations and how a shock such as COVID would impact them. That is where we shifted our focus as an organization into social protection as a whole for a family, focusing on the mother and child as an important stakeholder in the entire process, but looking overall at what are measures that need to be in place, what are schemes, policies that the government already has, which are not being implemented, and how can we ensure the implementation of all of these to make sure that there is social protection for an entire family. We've seen post-pandemic, and the current numbers show that more than 230 billion people have been pushed back into poverty. Now, for these to move back up and for a shock like COVID to not have an impact on their lives again, there's a lot of work that needs to be done around social justice and social protection. And that is what we focus on, essentially. So there are, just going to move on. In terms of the work that we've been doing and our impact in all over India, we've been working in about 18 states. We've about 550 crores benefits unlocked so far for families, because we try working at state and central government levels, ensuring that the supply side of the chain is managed, that the implementation process from the government's end is something that we focus on a lot to make sure that the end beneficiary is getting all of the welfare that they are entitled to. And I'll move to what we're talking of as the social protection systems, right? Our definition, so when you look at a social protection system in a country, when we're looking at India, and we look at just say direct benefit transfers as something that the government has instituted for social protection, there are more than 500 schemes that are there available at a national level. These are fragmented in multiple departments, under multiple heads. States have even more schemes that they can attribute to themselves. And what that has led to is a very non-streamlined mechanism of disbursing these schemes, one. And for the end beneficiary, in terms of access to these schemes, there are multiple challenges. The first one being that there is no one consolidated system of how they apply to any of these schemes. There is no one mechanism of how many documents are required. So I'll give you examples from the work that we've done in, say, PMMVY. and bringing in technology here and understanding how gender has a huge role to play in terms of access to that technology is, so for PMMVY, the maternity benefit scheme, it is a DBT of 5,000 rupees in 3 tranches. You need to fill out a form every time, which is a 22-page form to get access to that scheme. And for all the tranches, you need to fill out forms for each of them. There are documents that are required for each form. So you need to submit your Aadhaar card all 3 times. The husband's Aadhaar card is mandatory as another document that's required. Now, all of these forms, once they're collected, are filled at a ground level by the frontline workers. So we have ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers as the frontline force of the Women and Child Development departments. They collect these forms, they fill them by hand. That is then given to someone at a block level to shift it online. So this is one first place in itself where technology is missing at the ground level, right? So in terms of capacity building, training of the frontline workers to actually just fill out those forms themselves, to make it easy for them to access these forms and to fill them out to reduce errors. That's one point where we see there's an immediate gap. These forms get filled online by someone at a block office. There is no grievance redressal mechanism available. There is no technology available to any of these women to find out the status of their applications. So all of this is done manually here. And they need to go back to that block office, understand what is happening, where their form is stuck. If they've transferred it online, are there errors that have happened in it? But essentially, they do not have any direct recourse mechanism. So grievance redressal is another point that is missing from this particular scheme in terms of a direct and very simple tech solutions have been implemented in other schemes, which are missing from this particular scheme. So here, grievance redressal is the second piece, which is problematic. The third thing that I'd highlight for PMMVY is access to banking and technology there for women. So a lot of times the bank accounts that women have are either on their husband's names or a male member in their family, and the bank account may not be in their own name. The mobile numbers that they entered are not in their own, not their own mobile numbers. It might be somebody else in the family, because mobile penetration or smartphone penetration and the number of women having access to those is varied across the country, but is still lower among women than men. So there is the third point of divide, where if the bank account details are not theirs, the money that they're getting, they don't have direct access to it either. So welfare that they're entitled to and receiving is not coming to them at the end of the day. That's because of the two things that I mentioned. One is financial inclusion in that sense, and digital in terms of mobile phones. So not having their own bank accounts, not having that information, not knowing where to check, who to ask. So that is the third point where there is a divide in this. So this is just one scheme where we're seeing 3 areas where, in terms of technology, women are not able to access their the welfare that is given to them. So that is, if you just think of this now in the context of 500 schemes, and think of the number of schemes that are centered around women and children, there is a gender budget which is supposed to be implemented, and every state has to be creating that, utilizing it, and it's there from a Gram Panchayat level to a state level to the union level, but it is not being implemented as well. And so that budget is not being utilized. The other pieces that we look at are labor force participation then for women. There we're noticing that, again, technology plays a role in the sense of bank account details. But if you look at, say, a specific policy like MGNREGA, on the ground, you'll see a lot of women, but bank accounts might be of men, or the card might be in a man's name. Checking those pieces, utilizing tech to see how that's happening, seeing where the money is going. All of those pieces of implementation in the process in itself of implementing a policy are things that need to be checked, which aren't being done right now. So when we look at social protection systems, I think one thing that we're trying to do a lot is of convergence and consolidation, because the number of schemes centered around, say, women and children are multiple. The same woman has to apply for maternity benefits under PMFVY, under JSY, which is Janani Suraksha Yojana, under JSSY, and under a state scheme, utilizing the same documents. So there are 4 schemes that you apply for where technology could have helped, where we're not seeing it do so. And what we've seen in terms of consolidation, and a very good model of that, has been in states of countries of Mexico, Brazil, Indonesia, where they have consolidated portfolios of schemes and brought them down from say 500, 700 schemes to 10, 12 schemes, which are focusing on populations and then on certain pockets, building capacity to be utilizing those schemes to have access to them as well. Some of the challenges that we're seeing in this social protection architecture are, beneficiary data to target schemes. So as I was mentioning, like bank accounts, phone numbers are certain challenges. Other than that, deliveries of girl children are hidden, or if we're looking at from the beginning itself, like whether girls are being registered in schools. So there are multiple social challenges that also come into play when we're looking at girls and women in particular, how that is being addressed. So data in itself, there is a lack of that data. Cross-departmental data systems. Now, some of the schemes that I mentioned are across multiple departments. So even like labor has a scheme, WCD has a scheme, Women and Child Development Department, Health Department has a scheme, all targeting the same beneficiary, but none of them talking to each other. So at the back end, none of those data and tech systems are actually talking to each other. So understanding how that cross-departmental data system can be converged. Demand side gaps, again, the beneficiaries themselves are not aware of what pieces, what their rights are, or how they could get access to some of those. And I'm sure Darshak can speak a little more about that demand side challenges that they've seen and faced. And then an integrated e-governance system, right? So can we have, there is no one portal, no one system which is tracking all of this from the supply side at a state level, saying these are all of the schemes that we're looking at for women. This is where technology is aiding them, this is where it's not, and this is what needs to be done to address some of those issues. So these are some of the challenges we've seen currently in the social protection architecture. And again, this is like a bottoms-up approach to address some of these challenges, things that we've realized that what are pieces that are needed if we have to have a single window system. And I think I'd start and focus on one of them, which is targeting, which we've realized is one of the biggest challenges because women do not have access to technology as much. So if there is an application, if there's an advertisement sent out for applying to a certain scheme, women who are unable to access that is, and at the bottom percentile, the bottom 25% of people who possibly require it the most are unable to access it because a lot of these advertisements or schemes are now online. You need to apply to something online. You need to access a computer or a mobile phone, which is a smartphone, to be able to do that. And we're seeing more and more that bottom percentage of people is unable to do so. So targeting is one issue that is that needs to be like resolved a bit more, and also focusing on that particular group. Because say, for instance, if we're looking at the education policy that we're working on, Section 12(1)(c), we realize that in a lot of states, the people who are applying for the policy, it's the mothers who are generally filling an application for their children. And the ones who are doing so are in some way they're not in the bottom most of the group that we should be targeting or who can get access to this. They have some resources or are in some way able to apply. So our targeting efforts need to change quite a lot in that aspect. And the other things that are needed in a single window system of having one unified payment system, there needs to be registration and applications that work in a systematic manner so that you don't need to keep applying multiple times for a single benefit, application tracking, grievance redressal systems, etc. So these are other examples of what all we need to do to ensure a single window system works. And from a supply side and a policy and process angle, these are ways in which we can help women who have less access as well to technology and where there is a divide, because making the process simpler for them is what is required. rather than overcomplicating it with the number of schemes and policies that we have in place. Yeah, this I will not get into, is a very complicated design overview. I'll leave it on the screen. And the only thing that I'll highlight out of this is that 3 things that we essentially need to do for sure. So at a registration or an application stage, ensuring that there is enough awareness and that there is a very simple method of applying for any sort of social protection schemes. That is possible only if there is an integrated scheme database. If all the departments are talking to one another, if at least at the back end, the databases are talking to one another. So whatever conditionalities these different schemes have, if they can be interlinked, then the woman doesn't need to be sort of a woman that, or whoever the person who's applying doesn't need to access multiple windows. And one of the most crucial aspects of this is the monitoring and evaluation, which gets missed out a lot of times. And we stop at a level where it just says, okay, so many women have applied or so many people have applied for a particular scheme, and it ends at that. But what has happened with that? Are we trying to understand whether the benefit has been utilized for its intended impact or not? And that sort of monitoring and evaluation is extremely necessary, so that it's a loop that ties back into making the process simpler for them in the future. Yeah, and there is sort of like a bottoms up and a top down approach then. So there's a bottoms up approach of ensuring that the ground is connected to ensuring social protection happens. And at a top down level, when we're looking at it, so technology consulting to understand how we are creating a consolidated database, right? A single registry window. There we need to look at a multi-departmental approach, as I mentioned. One ID for a family is something that we've been looking at, because very often the major challenges are, if anything's a DBT related to the woman's bank account or a family's bank account, names not being changed on Aadhaar cards, things like that. So there again, getting your address or name changed after you get married for a woman, to get her surname changed, without which she doesn't have access to a lot of the schemes, right? So those are certain like very technical and smaller issues that we've seen come up, where women have a disadvantage, one, because of the divide in terms of not knowing the technology that's required, but also not having access to it and to the information that's needed. So making sure that there's a unique family ID. Examples of that, Haryana is doing a very good thing with the Parivar Pehchan Patra. They're trying to come up with one specific ID for each family. So that's one example. A couple of other states have also started doing that. Tamil Nadu is doing it with the family database, etc. And then there needs to be capacity building done. So I think 2 things in the implementation part, and Ritesh, you mentioned this at the beginning, right? That there are so many schemes, that there are so many pieces that we already have existing. So on paper, everything's beautiful right now, but the challenge is in the implementation. And that's what we need to really work on. So 2 things. One is capacity building in terms of understanding the policy and the process, both, right? So what is the intended impact of the policy? Where are those loopholes? What can we advocate for and change? And then what in the process is making this cumbersome? Why are women not able to understand and access a scheme when it is online? Is it only because they don't have mobile phones? Is it because they don't know how to read and write? Is it because there is no network in the areas they work in? So a lot of the rural and tribal areas where we work, there is an issue of networks. And so women, more often than not, will not travel that distance to reach a place where there is a network, where there is network available. And it'll be men who do that, because more of the caregiving activities are associated with the women. So there are multiple social challenges as well that come into play, and looking at these different geographies. So where do we need to build that capacity to then translate what is there in these documents into a day-to-day activity? So when we're looking at frontline workers, every ASHA worker, Anganwadi worker has been given a smartphone. They're afraid to open it. They don't know what's going to happen if they click something wrong and then some money is going to get transferred somewhere. Like I've seen that firsthand working with them. And we were in a village in Bijapur in Chhattisgarh, and the Anganwadi worker, the teacher there, she told us that I don't want to, they've given us this, it's in its box and packing. Can you look at it? Because I don't know what to do with it. And I have this old Nokia phone, which works pretty well to make calls. I don't think I want to go to I don't know what to do with this smartphone. So while the government has been engaging in capacity building workshops, they do these things. They need to be more streamlined. They need to also be, I think, more focused, and they need to happen at a better frequency in order to really see its impact. So when you're looking at frontline workers, when we're looking at the beneficiaries, all of whom are women, there is a fear of technology, as well as, and due to a variety of reasons. So how do we build that capacity? And then in the policy advocacy in that space, we need to really understand what is it that we are advocating for, who are the people we're advocating for to bring about these changes, smaller process related changes as well. Yeah, some potential benefits of sort of having a more integrated approach to social protection is in for policy for governments and for beneficiaries, for all three groups, for all the different stakeholders involved. For the government, it's actually a very, very beneficial, or say more efficient process, because they are now ensuring that social benefits are transferred to people with more efficiency. So even if we look at 1% of an efficiency gain, there is a 1.6 trillion INR social protection budget in the country currently. And even if we save 1% of that due to efficiency gains in technology, in consolidation through convergence, that is a huge saving for the government. And then there is a very high recall value. Women and men, all people who are applying for these schemes and policies will be able to do so much better. For the beneficiaries on the ground, we're seeing that, grievance redressal is speedy, which is something that's missing across the board from a lot of our schemes. And also that feedback from the ground goes back up, and we're able to close a loop there. So these are some of the potential benefits. And we've seen during the pandemic that not being able to be being tech savvy is something that is now, it's a given. That's the way the world is going to move forward. Not being able to utilize and engage with technology is a challenge for mothers, particularly because their children, they need to teach their children to do that. Schools are online for the past 2 years. Not having access to a mobile phone in a family of 3 kids, 2 of whom are girls and 1's a boy, is again a divide that we see, right? Anecdotally, and data also showing that girls are dropping out much more. So if you're looking at, there's multiple pieces in the puzzle that we can put together to see where that divide is really, what it's leading to. So, yep. And I think that I will stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhuri, for these insights. I'm sure, the participants, they found this presentation really engaging and relevant. And I'm sure we have a lot of questions for you. I have written down a couple of questions for you. So yeah, we'll sort of, I'll request you to answer those at the end. Moving on, we have Madhura Karnik and Aniket Deogar from Darshak Empowerment Solutions Private Limited. Madhura is an ex-journalist and a financial analyst, and she's the Chief Growth Officer at Darshak, managing sales, marketing, communications, client servicing, and impact measurement. And previously, she's worked with Quartz, Mint, and Chrysit. Aniket is the CEO and co-founder of Darshak, an alumnus of Sriram College of Commerce, Delhi. Aniket started out as a Teach for India fellow, and over the course of the last 12 years, he has co-founded various social development organizations in this space and is on board of a few reputed organizations as well. Recently, he was also an Acumen fellow. Welcome, Aniket and Madhura. The stage is yours.
It's everything fantastic to be here, and I think Madhuri has done a fantastic job in laying out the base for us in terms of the problems that the social security space has. So I think Madhura and I will jump right to the demand side in terms of solutioning, in terms of how we are looking at solving these problems. I personally feel also that apart from being a technology challenge, government scheme delivery is largely a political challenge because it's time bound. It's driven by individuals, not by process. So I think that is something that we've seen time and again in different geographies. Because end of the day, schemes are political manifestos, right? If a particular government comes in and decides to push LPG gas, it will happen. A particular state comes in and tries to push a particular scholarship program, it will happen. And I think that while it is for a democracy fantastic, for organizations like us, it also makes the things even more tougher on the ground because it's an ever-changing, individual-focused approach. Haq Darshak started in 2016 Jan, and we are a social enterprise focused on this kind of aggregated demand delivery. We are sector agnostic and geography agnostic, focused on whatever the citizens want in terms of government schemes, documents, grievance, service delivery, and we have a very collaborative and approach where we are working with organizations, governments, corporates, philanthropies to see how we can ensure maximum number of people can get these benefits. I'll pause here and hand it over to Madhura, who will also, I think, show us some of the work that you've done with the women entrepreneurs. Over to you, Madhura.
Thanks, Aniket. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. I think, like Aniket mentioned, let's quickly just look at a video. Really talks about how we are trying to solve that demand gap. And the main sort of focus here is our Haq Darshak on the field, who is predominantly a woman. And then she uses our app to basically link schemes. So let's spend a couple of minutes.
माझं नाव वीणा जाधव आहे. मी हकदर्शिका आहे. मी पुण्यामध्ये असते. मी लोकांच्या घरोघरी जाऊन त्यांना आणि त्यांच्या परिवारातील सदस्यांना पात्र असलेल्या योजनांची माहिती हकदर्शक ॲपमधून देते आणि त्यांना त्या योजनांना अर्ज करण्यात मदत करते.
काम को करते करते मैंने अपने लिए एक स्कूटी खरीदी है जिससे मैं कहीं भी अपने सुविधा से आ जा सकूं और इसी पैसे से मैं अपना उसका पेमेंट करती जा रही हर महीने। पहले मैं घर में एक बहू और एक पत्नी के रूप में थी, वही पर नाम से पहचानी जाती थी, लेकिन अब लोग मुझे मेरे नाम से नीलम साहू के नाम से सब जानते हैं।
Yeah. So moving ahead, like Aniket mentioned, just want to quickly walk you all through how our model really works and what we're trying to solve. I think like Tarun and Madhuri mentioned, we all know what the problems are. So we are basically looking at those problems from two lenses. One is technology, but given the digital divide today, technology alone is not going to be the sole solution for families and households and the most excluded to access schemes, which is why we have an assisted tech model. We have a platform where we have mapped welfare schemes across the states in the country. Like Aniket mentioned, sector agnostic. We have schemes from social security to health to livelihoods to education, even documentation, and some of our private sort of welfare, financial inclusion focused schemes as well. And what happens with this technology is that the app can help you profile a citizen or a small business and determine a customized list of eligible schemes. This particular part of the solution is directly aimed at bridging that information gap that we all were listening to when Madhuri was explaining that, you know, people do not know of their entitlements, while they would know a part of their entitlements, they would not know how to go and access them in terms of applications. And if they do that as well, then where is the grievance sort of redressal system? So the eligibility discovery engine for us is the first step in actually telling someone about their schemes, educating them, making them aware. And the second part of our model, which is the assisted part, is where our trained frontline worker comes in, who we also call as a Haq Darshak. And she's the one who's using our app, mobile app, and taking it to the community and then also providing this end-to-end support that we call, which means that after the initial awareness, our focus is actually on the convergence of the benefits. So anything that happens from awareness to getting the benefit in hand is what our Hak Darshak does. And she uses a smartphone that she has and the Hak Darshak app that she has to do that. This includes, checking for documentation that is required for application, or getting all the documentation done, getting the missing links sort of back together, getting linkages done, or filling those forms, taking it to the departments, doing the follow-ups, then ensuring that the benefit is received, and also record the proof that the benefit is in fact received. And this is the service that this woman Hak Darshak is providing to her community. She is from the community. We are training her so that the community has someone to go to and it becomes a sustainable model. And for the service that she is providing them, she can also charge them a small fee, which is of course affordable and becomes her revenue. So in this two-pronged approach, basically we're looking at bridging the gap in social protection systems, but also creating livelihoods for these women who are the change agents in the community. In the last 6 years, we are a 6-year-old organization. We've been able to unlock direct benefits, which is basically measurable, tangible benefits of 2,000 crore plus. The long-term benefits are much more. We've reached 1.56 million Indians across 24 states. We also started a separate unit that focuses on micro businesses. And in the last 1 year, we've reached around 17,000 of micro businesses. And in the process, we've trained 19,000 Hak Darshaks, who are these women across communities. We've partnered with NGOs and CSO cadres to train them as Hak Darshaks, to give them our platforms. And also we are implementing very customized scheme linkage programs for our philanthropy and CSR partners. Today, we want to actually focus on, how this woman Hak Darshak is actually making the change in the community by using the app. And to just sort of take a step back, wanted to talk a bit about why women as change agents, right? And we did a study with Dalberg a couple of years ago to actually understand how women look at entitlements and how women look at helping their community with entitlements. And there was a very interesting finding that we saw, that for women, the government entitlement is as much a transactional benefit as much as a social benefit, because it sort of puts her and the family into, what they call as a socially acceptable sort of, use case. And to do that with a mobile phone is this sort of digital empowerment angle that we saw. Most of these women do believe that a government entitlement is going to help improve their own as well as their family's economic status. And to solve this problem by using a smartphone, which they have just started using for utilities and just not for videos and WhatsApp chats, is what excites this woman and gives her that empowerment. Which is why our approach has been that we maximize our focus on women Hak Darshaks. In any community that we start scheme linkage work, the first step is to identify who from the community can be trained as a Hak Darshak. And we've never, in fact, gotten someone else into a community and told that person to, do the scheme linkage work, because it is about empowering the entire sort of community. To just quickly also look at some numbers, right? So who is this Hak Darshak? What is this woman? What is her age? What is her demographic? 62% of our Hak Darshaks are between 21 and 30 years of age. Almost all can read and write in the local language. However, that does not mean they've passed the class 10 sort of threshold, but they can read and write in the local language. Majority of them already have some sort of community leadership position, which is why we also work a lot with SAGs, we work with SRLMs and train them as Hak Darshaks. However, we also have a good mix of non-leadership roles who are now transitioning to become Hak Darshaks, and they were casual laborers, they were farm laborers, some of them were not employed at all, and got the first chance to sort of work as a Hagdarshak and earn. Um, this is a very interesting sort of mix for us, because this shows the path to growth, that if we want to actually today from 19,000 Hagdarshaks to, up 25-30,000 Hagdarshaks in the next 1 year, we still have a captive audience of these women who can be empowered with a phone, with great training, and they become change agents in the community. So when we actually approach a woman to be trained as Hagdarshaks, again, some field insights, there is obviously massive resistance given the social constructs in most rural areas in India. That how can a woman, start on an entrepreneurial journey and charge people for the schemes and the services that she's helping them unlock benefits from. So there are multiple layers in terms of capacity building that we look at from a women perspective. First, of course, is a clear-cut sort of a training program that we have on the mobile app, and also on the understanding of the welfare system as well as the schemes. But the larger sort of, the softer aspects in terms of communication here is actually how does she position welfare and schemes in the community. And if she can do that, then the community can actually adapt faster to going and doing applications on their own, because they've seen one of them do it for them, right? So this is very important in our process. Of course, we have an extensive on-field training that we provide these women Hagdarshaks, especially around application processes. Like Madhuri mentioned, everything is a maze, right? And we are trying to sort of fix the puzzle by looking at these different problems and application processes, and just the sheer steps involved in applying for one simple documentation today is what keeps most of the people without a documentation away to go and apply. So I think this is the most important part of how do you train this women to be a champion in application processes. Then we are also focusing on cash flow management. These women are charging a service fee to the community, and they need to understand how do they do that as an entrepreneur. And how do I as a Hagdarshak today balance my earning as well as look at what the need from the community is, and then also use this for my individual sort of financial empowerment. And I'll come to some great findings that we've got through our surveys over the next couple of slides. And the last part is really then how do we work with the system? Because just training someone as a Hagdarshak, giving them an app, or training them on various application processes is not enough. These women Hagdarshaks need to know how to talk to government authorities, how to work with government authorities, where to go for grievance redressals, and how to again create that support system, a parallel support system for the government, so that they are basically working together and not as silos. So this is basically what we do in terms of capacity building of our women Hagdarshaks. Again, we did a deep dive with 87 women Hagdarshaks across the country from multiple states, and kind of measured that what is this model really doing to them. For the community, I think the impact is pretty much direct. When you're linking a household with a scheme, there is a monetary benefit, there's a non-monetary benefit. So that is something that is well established. But what does this do to this woman who is actually enabling this unlocking of benefits? And again, to talk about a couple of interesting notes, most of the numbers are in front of you. Two very important observations. One is the overall awareness and ease of accessing entitlements that the women realize that is actually not a very difficult process. If you know the system, if you know the process, if you have a monitoring system, then actually application to a scheme can be seamless. The unlocking of benefit can be followed up with, and the household can get schemes, right? So that's number one. So 90%, when 97% of our Hagdarshaks say that my community now today knows more about what social protection is than last year when I wasn't in Hagdarshak. We think that's one metric of success. And then a very important point in terms of the increased governance. What has happened is, as these women are from the community, they've started asking questions. They started asking questions to the sarpanches, to the tehsildars, to the talatis. that when I come to you with 50 applications and you're not signing on them, or there's a delay in the benefit unlocking, why is this happening? Where do I go to? Who do I go to? And how do I solve this problem? Most of our Haqdarshaks agree that the government departments around them have become more accountable to actually answer these questions, which typically citizens might not go and ask. Moving on to, again, what does it mean financially for these women? Like I mentioned, these women do charge a service fee because they're providing an essential support service. And 90% of these women are in fact using this income for their children's education, for helping their family. Many of them have now funded their own businesses. They've in fact started small centers for scheme applications, for basic KYCs, or they've taken CSC IDs from the government and started their own center. So they've funded their own business with this earning. A lot of them have used it for repaying their loans, and that sort of financial health focus again becomes very important in our model, because most of them come from families where there is just a sole breadwinner. And now with this sort of earning that they've got, which is also flexible because they don't have to work 8 hours a day, 4 to 5 hours a day is enough. This sort of model really works. An average income of our Haqdarshak is around 3,300. So in rural areas, this really becomes a great support every month for the woman to actually continue being a Haqdarshak. In urban areas, of course, this number is slightly higher and there are multiple opportunities. But in rural and semi-rural, semi-urban areas, a 3,300 average monthly earning for a woman becomes extremely sustainable for her to actually, go up the value chain. Since our model is also focused on technology, one of the biggest challenges that I think we as a team had to solve when we actually started training women on the app was how do you convince the women that the technology is not just entertainment. Technology is a utility, and how do they shift from the entertainment lens to the utility lens? And that's where most of our initial training of the app sort of focuses on that. How do you tell them that, hey, here's an app to actually help you get a loan through the Mudra scheme, or here's an app which will confirm if you can get funds to build your house under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. And that's where the digital independence sort of comes for us in one of our other impact metrics. We've had Haqdarshaks who did not have their own phones. The male of the family always had a phone, always uses it for multiple use cases, but the women of the family don't have access to it. 30% of our Haqdarshaks have now gone back and bought their own smartphones from the earnings that they've got through this model. And in terms of how the shift has happened in adoption of services, right? Again, a couple of very interesting data points that we've seen is that around 20%, 19% are now increasingly using digital channels, even for things like money transfers, for which there are already channels like a CSC, a bank Sakhi. You have these local money transfer agents, but these women from rural areas have now started using the phone as a tool for money transfers and also for digital payment. And that, I think, is a sweet spot where we are also looking at that while you make them financially independent, how digitally independent are they? Around 47% also said that we've now started using this as a video calling platform for the community. What essentially happened in COVID is that this door-to-door model that we all saw sometime back in the video, we could not follow that because of social distancing rules. Many of our Haqdarshaks, in fact, moved to the virtual mode where we taught them how can they use a Google Meet call to actually talk to the community, to ask them if any of them had a documentation missing so that they could get the free ration that the government was announcing. If there was if they missed on a DBT that the government announced for a particular type of target segment, and they started using these platforms for linkages. Today we have many schemes that our Haqdarshaks do online end-to-end, which means that right from doing the screening online by calling the end beneficiary to actually going on government portals online, filling all those forms, taking printouts, and not really following this door-to-door approach where possible. And that, I think, is another way for us to learn and then scale in terms of our digital sort of, pathway going ahead. Again, would like to actually give some real life examples of some of our leaders. Like I said, that we have people like Zeba Khan, who has now her own laptop in the Mandoi village, has started her own center called Zeba Computers, and is now operating as a CSE, like a mini CSE center. And for us, that is success, right? Because she started as this community agent with the Hagdarshak mobile app. Today, she can do multiple scheme linkages through this center for her community. People know her as the scheme specialist and expert. We also have cases where our Hagdarshaks have gone ahead and taken leadership and responsibility roles in the local governance systems. A couple of our Hagdarshaks, including Anita from Chhattisgarh, have led the Gram Panchayat elections, have won them only because the community started knowing them for schemes. And the Gram Sevaks and the Gram Sabha members, in fact, went to her and said that, it's actually our job to do schemes, but since you've been linking people around you with schemes, why don't you now contest for the election? And then we have people like Manisha, who started as a Hagdarshak and now has become a full-time employee of Hagdarshak. And literally in Talasari, where the Kurze village is, it's a heavily tribal area, she now has people coming to her, finding the house, and saying that, oh, this is the documentation I want. I heard you do this thing for communities. Why don't you do it for us? So while these are very, 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 very qualitative aspects of our system today, we still believe that this community-led approach, this agent-led approach, is what will help us scale our work, our scheme linkage work, and is actually sort of solving two problems in one. Like, the communities know where to go to when they want to apply for schemes. These women are earning a substantial livelihood income for moving up the value chain, and the overarching sort of umbrella here is technology. I have this much to say, but I'll just hand it over to Aniket if he wants to add something. These are some of our partners that we work with across the country. But over to you, Aniket, in case you want to add a couple of closing points.
I think we'll pause here and just hand it over to Ritesh, see if there are any questions.
Yeah, I tried to sort of keep it at 5 p.m. because I know we are overshooting time, but Ritesh, over to you.
No worries. Thank you so much, Madhura, for that engaging presentation. Let me quickly sort of open the floor now for the final session, which is the question and answers. I know we are beyond 5, but maybe we can take about 5 or 7 minutes and see if we have any questions and answers. I'm just requesting anybody who has questions, so please use the raise hand function, and I can sort of, I'll ask you to ask your questions.
Yeah,
Apu,
good evening.
Yes.
Good evening. So what we can see that, for Hagdarshak, what actually the members, when they go to the village, what they actually see that, the local panchayat members, they don't allow them to do, because it is there for the benefits. It is for their benefits. They will not allow them to go do that kinds of works because for their votes. Yeah, that's maybe happened. And what could be the actually option for them? Actually, they are doing that for free. And if any of the Hagdarshak members will go and charges, then of course they will not do that. Right.
So, Apu, is your question that, Hagdarshaks, because they are charging a certain fees for their services, they may face some, the villagers may not be very happy with that. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. So what could be the actually that is the challenges that I can see, that could be the challenges. So okay, what could be the answer for that? What could be the actually responsibility of a Hagdarshak member? That's my actual question.
Yeah. Aniket, yeah, you wanted to say something.
No, I think that's a very, very valid question and something we faced constantly and even today face. I think it comes with time efficiency of any service, because we are presenting this as a service delivery. In India, citizen service centers actually are supposed to do this, along with Gram Panchayat elected members and Gram Sevak, who's a salaried employee of the government. But what happens is that CSCs end up doing a lot of bill payment services, printing services. And the Gram Sevak and Gram Pradhan, one is that they do not know about schemes, right? Even if we have met IS officers who do not know about all the schemes. So they do not know what is out there. So it's more of a push model. And secondly, it is not really true on the ground that these services are free. Right from CSCs to Gram Sevaks, Gram Pradhans, they do charge. So I think it comes down to the Hak say doing this doorstep delivery, ensuring that the information is there, doing the follow-up, charging after the service is delivered, and charging a nominal fee which they keep, and since they are local resources. But we definitely promote that this has to be done. I personally feel that this has to be done like any other public service, as a quality service. Just because it's a service for the poor doesn't mean it should not be of quality. It should be a quality service done at scale, include local community resources efficiently. And that's what we've seen. So wherever initially we have seen some resistance, I think initially after pushing the first 10, 20 services, we've in fact seen our Hakdarshaks getting office space within Gram Panchayat, saying that you sit here and get the services done because we don't know about schemes. You know about schemes. And so I think it totally depends. And ideally, we should have a lot more, I would say, Gram Panchayats and Gram Sevaks who have this kind of platforms, multiple technology platforms where they can get more information. But we haven't honestly seen this kind of resistance on cost. The resistance is if you apply for a scheme and you don't get the scheme, which can happen, right? Pension is oversubscribed, scholarship is oversubscribed. So then it becomes very difficult for the Hakdarshak, because in the village, that person might be your cousin or relative, and you have promised them a scheme and the scheme hasn't come. And you can't do anything about it. That is the bigger risk than the cost.
Maybe I can go. I have a question for Tarun and Madhuri. So, Madhuri, you made a very interesting point during your presentation. You talked about the importance of mobile phone access and ownership, and its relationship with, getting access to entitlements. So, can you talk a little bit about that more from the perspective of, how do you sort of respond to this sort of a challenge on ground? Any strategies for that?
Sure, Ritesh. I know Lisa had a question as well. So I just noticed that, Ritesh. So I think, what Madhura and, Aniket just alluded, in the interim before, mobile phone penetration really increases, and, every, adult member in the household, especially, mothers and, women have access to mobile phones. Our estimate is at least in the next 5 to 10 years, we would need government and civil society intermediaries like Hakdarshaks to intermediate this transaction. Whether it's Gram Sevaks or village volunteers or CSCs or frontline workers of the line departments, plus kind of non-profit frontline volunteers and community champions and intermediaries like Hakdarshaks. So I think it has to be kind of this entire ecosystem of intermediaries who are translating the rules on the ground and are able to also translate the requirements to file for different entitlements, while people are able to be empowered individually themselves with the mobile phone. So that's one. And second, like I said, I think the structural gap that needs to definitely be solved for is not forcing people to be authenticating themselves 500 times over for similar set of benefits. We could do a lot of work on the back end to design that more frictionless and make it more seamless for families on the ground. And secondly, kind of it can be more critical about reducing the number of touch points and transactions as well, so that the need for actually a digital device is reduced as well. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you for that, Tarun. Lisa, we'll just go back to you for your question.
Sure. Thank you, Ritesh. And I think it's less questions, but really just the learnings that I got today from both presentations. So firstly, the video, I was so happy to see in the opening video a woman badminton player, and also to see the girl along with the boy running a lot in the video. So I work for the Nanny Foundation, and I'm the sport director for the Nanny Foundation. So we are building a Sports for Life program, and I think the importance of girls participating and staying physically active. You see them, for instance, in that young video being active, and our goal is that they stay active for life. So that's really what we're building. And part of it our involvement with this group is that we are creating a digital sports resource for our community of girls and women. So from the presentation from Indus, one of my big learnings is the importance of simplicity. We are reaching out to many companies to help design this application for us. And what I find the biggest challenge is they're so excited to tell you how complicated their platform is, and it could do this, and it could do that, and it could do all this stuff. Whereas we need it just to do a very simple and a good job well, as far as you mentioned, like having just one window, and we don't want this to be a burden on our women community. So this is, hearing you speak about that is really helpful for me to hear. And then from our second group, what I find fascinating is your model of training these local community women for your programs, because that's the exact model that we are using for sports as well. So what we have, 180,000 girls participating in our sports program, but we chose to train the women living in the community with these girls as our leaders in our sports program. So similar to what you're doing with darshak, we are doing the same in sports. And the benefit of having women from those communities who know the community so well, who know the challenges on the ground for in your case families, in our case for the girls, is so paramount to them being, in our case, sports specialists. Like, if they know the girls, they know the community, they know the challenges, this is already far and above if we can bring, the coach of the women's Indian national team in to that community to teach sports. So it was very interesting for me to hear the similarities in our programs. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Lisa. I think you've summarized the entire thing so well and sort of helped us sort of transition into our concluding, part of the webinar. So thank you so much, Madhura, Madhuri, Tarun, Aniket, for taking the time to be here despite your busy schedules. Attendees, thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that if you have any further questions, please write to me. I'll be very happy to connect you to our speakers, or seek responses as is appropriate. This, as you know, was the last webinar of the speaker series. So I especially wanted to sort of laud Reliance Foundation and USAID for making this happen. Our colleagues from Dev Global who diligently worked behind the scenes, Savannah, Raisa, Sharon, our colleagues from the awardee organizations who participated in these webinars and made us feel like rock stars all the time. Thank you so much for that. And Ravi Sterling, of course, the woman behind all this method and madness. So thank you, everyone. And I hope to see all of you soon with another set of webinars. Good afternoon, all of you. Thank you, Madhuri. And
thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Good evening.
Bye. Thank you.